If you want to talk about automotive monopolies, you cannot ignore the two-door rear-wheel drive budget sports car monopoly, held exclusively for the last 30 years by one car, the Mazda MX5. In 1976, Motor Trend journalist Bob Hull is talking to his good friend Kenichi Yamamoto, and they come up with this idea of an inexpensive homage to the British sports car. Well, Kenichi Yamamoto just happens to be the head of Mazda's R&D department. What a coincidence. And Mazda said, yeah, that's a good idea. So, the project was a go. But in order to design it, they had a little challenge between Japanese design teams and American design teams. And whoever won, their design would be picked for build. Well, to cut it short, the Americans won. Mazda used a new technique for designing called Jinbaitai, which is a Japanese philosophy for development. And they had a few requirements for this Jinbaitai technique. It must be light, it must be compact, it must have a comfortable and spacious interior. It must be front-engined rear-wheel drive, and crucially, a 50-50 weight distribution. With all that being said, the 1989 Chicago Auto Show was the launch point for the MX5, or Miata as it was called here in the States. And they definitely accomplished their mission. It had no amenities at all, for the base model anyway, but that meant it only cost $14,000 for that car. And it weighed just 2,100 pounds. And sure, the 1.6-liter four-cylinder only made 118 horsepower, but it didn't matter because A, it was so light, and B, the 50-50 weight distribution meant it handled like a dream. Critics rated it the best sports car of the year, and Car and Driver liked it so much they gave it a spot on their 10 best list 3 years in a row. And Mazda made a lot of special editions, a lot of them. But the specialist of the special editions was the 1991 Le Mans edition. Why? Because in 1991, Mazda won the 24 Hours of Le Mans outright, becoming the first Japanese manufacturer to do so. So to celebrate this, they made an MX5 celebration, which featured a 150 horsepower i4 that meant 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds, and crucially it wore one of the best paint schemes in the history of auto racing. Yeah, and you're thinking, that's really cool, how do I get one? Well, they only made 24 and they were all sold in Japan, so not very easily, is the answer. And in 1998, the Mazda got a full refresh for the second gen, and it now had a base model 1.8-liter engine making 140 horsepower, and a top speed of 130, and it needed that horsepower because it got better anti-roll bars, bigger tires, four-wheel independent suspension, and yet it still cost under $20,000. And it actually had like a radio and air conditioning, which is weird for an MX5. And sure, it got a minor facelift in 2001 with new styling and improved structural rigidity. But if we want the king of the second-gen MX5, you gotta go with a turbocharged, Australian market-only version featuring 211 horsepower and only 100 were ever made, so they're super crazy rare. But if you want a turbocharged MX5 that is a little more common, you gotta get the Mazda speed. This is the only factory MX5 to come equipped with a turbocharger, and that means 177 horsepower. But it also means an upgraded suspension, a better gearbox, and an improved drivetrain. This thing could turn. It could turn almost a G in the corners. That's incredible for 2004 for such a cheap car. And even use this vehicle as an inspiration for the Miata Cup Sport, which they used to run the SCCA road racing series, which is still going on to this day. The third gen MX5 launched in 2005, and there were several facelifts in this one. There were 3 of them, I think. Each one of them getting more power, with the final total being 203 horsepower, and more weight. Now I say that, it still weighs a paltry 2,500 pounds. Now, enthusiasts kind of forget about these cars for obvious reasons. There's nothing revolutionary, there's no new crazy good features, there's no new surprises. But that didn't matter, because it was absolutely perfect. In fact, it got on the 10 best list from Car and Driver 7 times in a row. And Jeremy Clarkson was quoted saying, "The only reason I'm giving it 5 stars is because I can't give it 14. It was a critical and commercial sensation." But with all these new roadsters out, how is Mazda gonna compete? The answer? The 4th gen MX5 launched in 2015, a brand spanking new refresh from the ground up. It got a brand new 2-liter i4, making 188 horsepower. The weight was brought down under 2,400 pounds. It had modern suspension, modern brakes, and it cost just $24,000 while getting 36 mpg. And, most crucially to the MX5 trope, perfect 50-50 weight distribution. And that meant, just like the cars that came before it, it was fantastic around the corners. It won World Car of the Year, and it made the Car and Driver 10 best list every single year since its launch. In fact, some reviewers have called it the best MX5 of all time. And it shows. They've sold over 1 million MX5s since its launch in 1989. That's a lot of MX5s. The only thing more common on a racetrack than a Miata or MX5 is an MX5 with a massive wing on it. Modifications are crazy popular. Roll cages, sticky tires, wings, weight reduction, more power, more and more and more to make these things track monsters. It's been tuned since its very inception. In fact, the base motor can get over 250 horsepower with some tuning. And another thing that's common, engine swaps. These things range from relatively innocent rotary engines from RX-7s to 707 horsepower Hellcats. But swapping an engine yourself, that can be a pain. So, companies will do it for you. For instance, there's a company in California which makes the Flying MX5. They threw in a 6.2-liter Chevrolet LS3, making 525 horsepower, 490 foot-pounds of torque, in a rear-wheel drive, 2-door convertible, weighing less than 3,000 pounds. How did they do it? Well, they had to reverse engineer the entire car, down to individual lines of code to make it work. And that means it's very expensive. It cost 4 times more than the base price MX5. But you do get quite a car. It does 0 to 60 in a mind-boggling 3.5 seconds, a quarter mile in under 12, and has a top speed of an MX5 of almost 200 100 miles an hour. And that's not just it, because they improved the brakes, the suspension, the tires, the aero. Everything has been improved on this car, which means it can pull 1.07 G around the corners. It's a full-on supercar now. Or you could have the polar opposites. In 2018, Mazda, the factory team, began their first generation factory restoration program. Basically, if you take a ruined MX5 to Japan, they will fully restore it to OEM spec, and you can get a genuine 1990s MX5 brand spanking new. Now, we don't have that in America. Only 600 cars have been finished so far. However, what we do have is a partnership program where Mazda's suppliers make the original parts so they fit perfectly to the exact dimensions, but they're made with more modern materials, so they're more reliable, which means they run longer, which means you can use them longer. So it's not quite a full-on factory restoration with a mileage reset, but it's pretty darn good. What can I say? It doesn't matter if you're tearing through the mountains or drifting up the parking lot racetracks. There is one saying in the automotive world that has been tried and tested for 30 years and has never let anyone down. Miata is always the answer.